The summer of 1974 should have been one of the finest in Montana's history. Warm, vibrant, and alive with the buzz of tourists swarming the shores of Flathead Lake. By June, fishermen lined the docks, families picnicked along the beaches, and teenagers roared across the waters in small speedboats, their laughter echoing through the pines. But by July, that laughter had withered. Something was moving beneath the glassy surface of Flathead Lake, something ancient, unseen, and hungry. It started small, barely a ripple in the local papers. A young couple, Daniel and Marie Cross, disappeared after renting a canoe for a sunset paddle. Their boat washed ashore 2 days later, overturned and splintered as if crushed by a giant hand. No bodies were found. Sheriff Paul Hendricks led the search, combing the shoreline and dragging the depths with divers and sonar. Officially, the Crosses had drowned. Unofficially, Paul knew better. He'd found Daniel's camera bobbing near the dock, its waterproof casing cracked but intact. Inside, one photograph remained undeveloped. A dark mass rising from the water behind Daniel's smiling face, its form impossible to decipher. Locals whispered of the Flathead Lake monster and old legends stretching back to the Kootenai tribes, speaking of a horned serpent with an endless hunger. Tourists fled. Resorts canceled bookings. The lake, once alive with movement, grew still. Old-timers shook their heads, muttering that Flathead had always been cursed. They spoke of unexplained vanishings, accidents stretching back decades. The monster, they said, was no myth. It was real. And it was waking up. The town of Polson, usually bustling in midsummer, grew grim. Storefronts closed early. Children were kept indoors after dusk. The mayor, a portly, balding man named William Cranston, dismissed the talk as hysteria. "We have no monster problem," Cranston announced on the courthouse steps. "Just a little bad luck." 2 nights later, he vanished. Sheriff Hendricks, along with a few volunteers, mostly desperate fathers and restless fishermen, organized a midnight hunt. They armed themselves with harpoons, rifles, and spotlights, boarding rickety fishing boats to search the vast dark expanse of Flathead. Among them was Caleb Murphy, a reclusive trapper who claimed he'd once seen the thing years ago near Painted Rocks. His hands shook as he boarded the sheriff's boat, a massive shotgun resting on his lap. "You don't kill it," Caleb warned. "You can't. You survive it. Maybe." Fog rolled across the water, swallowing the boats one by one. Radios crackled with bursts of static and panicked voices. "Something under us." Huge one man shouted before his line went dead. Lights vanished, screams echoed briefly, then silence. By dawn, only 3 boats returned. The survivors spoke in broken sentences, trembling with terror. One described a massive serpent as thick as a car, eyes like floodlights, mouth, God, that mouth. Another wept openly, unable to finish a sentence. The town held an emergency meeting. Arguments erupted. Some demanded the National Guard. Others wanted to abandon Polson altogether. Sheriff Hendricks sat quietly until the room fell silent. "We closed the lake," he said. "Permanently." But it was too late. The monster had grown bold. It began to emerge from the lake at night, dragging itself onto the rocky shores. Witnesses described a body like a colossal eel or serpent, glistening black, scarred with jagged wounds as if it had fought battles older than memory. Its head bore 2 twisted horns, and its breath reeked of rotting fish and something far fouler, ancient death. Livestock disappeared. Pets vanished from yards. A child's sneaker was found, soaked and torn, near the lake's edge. The people of Polson barricaded themselves indoors after dark. Fires were lit along the shoreline in a desperate attempt to ward it off. One night, Caleb Murphy pounded on the sheriff's door, eyes wild. "It ain't just one," he gasped. "There's a nest. Down deep." He spoke of an underwater cavern near Wild Horse Island, a place he'd stumbled across years ago while fishing. He dropped anchor, only to see the water boil around him, shapes moving just beneath the surface. They'd been sleeping. Waiting. The sheriff didn't want to believe him. But with the disappearances mounting, he had no choice. Armed with dynamite and a grim resolve, Hendricks, Murphy, and a handful of desperate men set out to find the cavern. They reached Wild Horse Island at dusk. The waters around it were unnaturally still, as if the lake itself were holding its breath. Using sonar equipment borrowed from the Coast Guard, they located a hollow beneath the island, a vast chamber larger than any they'd imagined. Murphy muttered prayers under his breath as they planted charges along the shoreline. "We wake M," he said, "and we bury M." As they finished setting the last charge, the water erupted. Something titanic rose from the depths, shattering the surface in a geyser of black water. A head vaguely reptilian, with gnarled horns and milky dead eyes, loomed above them. The creature lunged. Hendricks fired his shotgun, the blast lost in the monster's roar. Boats capsized, men screamed, the lake swallowed them whole. Murphy, bleeding and half-drowned, reached the detonator. He slammed his hand down. Explosions ripped through Wild Horse Island, sending plumes of earth and rock skyward. The lake surged outward in a colossal wave, smashing against the shores. Then, silence. The island was gone, reduced to a smoking ruin. Divers later found fragments of ancient bones among the rubble, bones larger than anything belonging to known creatures. Of the men who went to Wild Horse Island, only Hendricks and Murphy survived. They never spoke of what they saw. Officially, the incident was blamed on a natural gas explosion. The disappearances ceased. Slowly, the tourists returned. The town moved on, though it carried scars beneath its smiles. But on quiet nights, when the wind dies and the water lies still, those who live along Flathead shores swear they hear it, a deep rumbling beneath the lakebed, a reminder. The shadows beneath Flathead are never truly gone.